right? Last year was last year. It was a good run for us. Didn't end the way we wanted it to end. And I'm excited to, first off, build our team, again, the proper way. Guys who have their relentless mindset, guys who want to hunt, guys who want to play with relentless effort and finish. Like, that's what I'm looking to build as we start this offseason.
I believe the Houston Texans are like a spaceship headed for the moon this upcoming NFL season. Coming off of a year where they went 10-7, won a playoff game, and won the AFC South, they've already made a handful of moves this offseason to further the development and talent level of the team. But before I hop into those moves, I do want to talk about the Texans' season last year and how special it really was. Prior to the 2023 season, the Houston Texans had won 11 total games in the prior 3 years, along with all of the Deshaun Watson drama and lawsuits, and then requesting a trade, sitting out the entire season, and then never playing another snap for the team in Houston. You combine that with a joke of a front office and coaching staff with Bill O'Brien, David Culley, and Lovie Smith, and the Texans were viewed as one of the worst organizations and teams to play for in the entire National Football League. So when you really consider where this franchise has come from since the 2020 season, it was pretty remarkable to see how they turned around their organization and team this year. But when you hit on the two most important things in the sport, and the quarterback and the head coach, it makes having success 10 times easier. That's exactly what the Texans did this past offseason. For head coach, they brought in DeMeco Ryans, the longtime Houston Texans linebacker, who moved his way up the ranks with the San Francisco 49ers and was one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. He has the ability to relate to every single player on the roster since he was a former player himself. I mean, all the players just really rallied behind him. I mean, you could see the emotion when they were talking about him or even after making a big play, just celebrating with him. He's a very good culture setter and player-friendly coach. And for the Texans, who are in desperate need of somebody to come in and actually set a foundation, DeMeco was the perfect fit when you also combine that he really grew up as a Houston Texan. I was pretty high on the hire, but I did not expect him to be this good out of the gates. And I think it's fair to say he's one of the best defensive minds in the league and also one of the best up-and-coming coaches. And the other franchise-altering move the Houston Texans made was drafting quarterback CJ Stroud out of Ohio State with the 2nd overall pick. Now, I've been very vocal about this. You can check my channel dating back all the way to last April. CJ Stroud was my #1 quarterback. I would have taken him #1 overall if I was the Carolina Panthers. I really like the precision passing and accuracy of CJ Stroud and his quick release. I thought he was going to come into the league and be one of the better pocket passers from the jump. But if I'm being honest, I did not expect to see what I saw last year from him as a rookie. I thought his peak was going to be around a top 10 to 12 quarterback in the league, and I was vastly mistaken. After one season as a 22-year-old, I would definitely have CJ Stroud in my top 10 quarterbacks already. And if we're being honest, probably top 8 or 7, depending on how high you are on other quarterbacks. But Stroud was just frankly amazing from the beginning. He ended the season with a 64% completion percentage, 4,100 yards, 23 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and a 108-point quarterback rating. I think the two things that really surprised me the most was his processing ability and his ability to play off script. At Ohio State, they do not run a super complicated offense. And when you have multiple wide receivers like Marvin Harrison and JSN and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, oftentimes the concepts are like, hey, just go to your first read and lob it up to one of these guys and let him make a play. So a lot of times when these quarterbacks come from top programs, it's kind of an adjustment period to get used to NFL concepts and how to read out defenses. But Stroud came in right away and you could see him processing the field very efficiently. And that was a very pleasant surprise when you consider his experience level. And then something that we did not see in college a ton until really the last game of CJ Stroud's collegiate career against Georgia was his ability to play under pressure and move outside the pocket and make things happen down the field. And he stayed within the confines of the pocket, really within a 2-foot radius, and just dissected defenses. But as we know, playing in the Big Ten and playing in the NFL are two completely different things. And that off-script skill is something that quarterbacks have started to need a little bit more at the next level. And that was a big question mark regarding CJ Stroud because he had such a low sample size of showing us that he could do that. But we saw pretty early on that he was going to be able to be an off-script playmaker. It felt like every game he was spinning out of the pocket and throwing something downfield to Nico Collins or Tank Dell, or pressures in his face, he sidesteps off his back foot and throws a dime down the field. And I do think the sky is the limit for him entering year number 2, the second year in Bobby Slowick's offense and being surrounded by even more talent. And that is a perfect segue into what the Houston Texans organization has done this offseason already to surround round CJ Stroud. The offseason started off for Houston with them re-signing Dalton Schultz, Desmond King, and Noah Brown to contract extensions. I thought Schultz had a quiet beginning to last season, but he really came on towards the end of the year. I definitely think he's one of the better receiving tight ends in the sport, so getting him back for around $12 million a year is a good contract. Noah Brown just adds some depth for the wide receiver unit I also like. I remember picking him up off of waivers for fantasy football for a couple of weeks when Tank Dell got hurt and he really showed out. But in terms of signing other teams' free agents, I think the Texans really wanted to focus on the defensive side of the ball. It seems like they're using an approach that teams with young quarterbacks should definitely utilize, which is signing veterans and spending money in free agency on the defensive unit, while in the draft getting young and cheap players to continue to grow and develop with your quarterback. And so Houston went out and signed players like Tim Settle, Deshaun Phillips, Foley Futukasi, Michael Ford, Jeff Okudah, Danico Audrey, just shoring up every single level of their defense and just getting more proven veterans to help out. But those were not the only defensive moves that they made, because they also brought in a couple of really big fishes. Danielle Hunter from the Minnesota Vikings on a 2-year, $49 million deal. Hunter had a career year last year with 16.5 sacks, and he's going to be replacing Jonathan Greenard, who got a big contract from the Vikings. It's a little bit funny because they essentially just swapped star pass rushers, but I do think Hunter is a bit more of a polished player, and he's really going to excel in D'Amico Ryan's defensive scheme. Azeez Al-Shaair from the Tennessee Titans was also brought in on a 3-year, $34 million contract to be the middle linebacker for the team. Al-Shaair is only 26 years old and had a career year last year with 163 tackles. He also has a lot of familiarity with D'Amico Ryan's, as he spent 4 years with the 49ers from 2019 to 2022. So he's going to step into the middle of that defense now with Christian Harris. That's a great 1-2 punch at the linebacker position. And just like that, the Texans now have multiple stars on their defense and a lot of really nice proven veterans. Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie in the secondary, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on the edges, and then the 2 new players that were also signed to help out in the interior, and Danico Audrey and Fatukasi will also be starters from day one. And with D'Amico Ryan's calling the shots on that side of the ball, I really think the Texans are going to have a really nice defense next year. And then the one and only big offensive move that they made was getting Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals for a 7th round pick. Upon trading peanuts for one of the better running backs in the league, they also gave him a 3-year, $27 million extension. And surprisingly, I actually saw a lot of people pushing back on this move and really not liking this for the Texans. There was a lot of Joe Mixon is washed, he's not the same player type of allegations being thrown out, but I personally still thought Mixon was a handful for the Bengals last year. He had over 1,000 yards rushing and averaged 4 yards per carry, which is perfectly in line with what he's done for the past 5 years. He had the second most rushing touchdowns of his career with 9, and he also contributed 52 catches, 376 yards, and 3 touchdowns in the passing game. So I don't know exactly where that narrative is coming from. Maybe Mixon doesn't have the exact same burst as he did just a couple of years ago, but I still think it's inarguable to not call him a top 10 running back in the league. And when you have the open cap space to bring in a star running back, I would take him over Devin Singletary any day of the week. Now shifting towards the draft, the Texans were expected to have the 23rd overall pick, but they decided to trade back and out of the first round completely with the Minnesota Vikings, picking up the number 42 overall selection, a 6th round pick, and a 2nd round pick in 2025. I don't quite get the mindset here. The Texans probably could have gotten a really good wide receiver if they wanted one, maybe an offensive lineman to shore up that unit, or maybe even a corner, since that's kind of the weak spot of their defense now. But who knows what's actually going on in the draft room regarding Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryan's. But regardless, now they have 2 top 60 picks to work with, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the Texans decide to use these selections. Could we see a wide receiver like Ladd McConkey, or maybe even Xavier Worthy if they're on the board? Maybe a corner like Kool-Aid McKinstry, or a pass rusher like Washington's Braylon Trice. They're going to have a lot of options, and I expect them just to see how the board falls and take the best player available. But in the end, I really like what the Texans have done so far this offseason and can't wait to see who they add in the draft. I think next year they're going to be one of the more scary teams in the league. The experience and talent level is going to be even more increased, and I think the Texans could compete for one of the top seeds in the AFC next year. That is how high I am on this team heading into 2024. But I want to know what you think about the Houston Texans and what you expect from them next season. Do you agree with me and think they're going to be one of the more scary teams in the AFC, or do you think they're still a couple of years away before they become a true contender in the NFL? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.